most kids come up with this feeling of jealousy. It's an emotion, and they don't understand it. So at the meeting in '72, people started becoming real jealous of Stanley, Tookie Williams. And these were the people who were his friends. Buddha was extremely jealous of him. Uh, Everybody at that meeting was really, really jealous of him. Pookie didn't like him. Uh, Me and Mouse wasn't jealous of him. We liked him. But we didn't know that when we went to that meeting, we were being ambushed because this was a meeting after a meeting. We had already had the meeting in the park. We had never had a night meeting before. So this was the first time. And they didn't tell me that there was going to be a night meeting. They told Mouse. And then Mouse told me later on that evening, he said, hey, we got to go to another meeting. And I said, I'm going to a party tonight. He said, yeah, but we'll go after the meeting. And I said, all right. So we got ready for the second meeting, and we went up there, and I didn't have any clinician that what the meeting was going to be about other than they were going to talk about, we're going to turn out the party, or we're going to go over here and buy something, or we're going to put our money together to get something, or someone's messing up with us.
Let me stop you right there. Hold that thought.
Mm-hmm.
Explain to us what you and Pookie's relationship was like at the time, and who told you that they was going to turn it out.
Okay, so Pookie and I, we always had a relationship, but at this time, we would be together at the parties. We would be together at the record hops. He went to school, with my brothers and them. They went to, St. Eugene's right there on, I guess that's 91st or 92nd, down the street from Manhattan Elementary School right there in Van Ness. So our relationship was good. I mean, we were all West Sides. So we all respected each other. We didn't crack jokes. So it was more a serious time. It wasn't a funny, fun time, because we all coming into the adolescence of our thug, man. And we watching the other kids that are older than us, and we watching their behavior and how they interact with each other. So, so our relationship was good. And so I thought that when Mouse said that there's going to be a second meeting, because we went to a meeting earlier that day up at St. Andrews Park. Now, the second meeting, as we going down Western, I say, hey, man, you crossed Manchester. You going in through the other street? And he says, no, it ain't. Our meeting ain't going to be there. I said, where is it going to be? He says, it's going to be at, Sportsman Park, which later became known as Jesse Owens Park. So we pulled up in there, and we went toward the back of the park because you could drive down in there. Guess that's where the golf course is at, back up in there. So we ended up somewhere in the park. I remember that, and because this is 1972, you guys, and I got a good memory, but damn. So it was back in the park. I think it was before the gym or after the gym, and the gym set up high. So we all in there. So we pull up, we get out the car. So I see Hillbilly. So I call Hillbilly. I say, hey, what's up, Hillbilly? He said, where the meeting at, Cutes? And I said, Mouse knows it's back in here somewhere. And then we saw Monkey Man. So Monkey Man said, it's over here. So we all walked over there. We just squatted down. And so Monkey Man was there. Buddha was there. Melvin Hardy was there. And the original Crip named Cuz was there. So Cuz was a slim, dark-skinned Crip. So Cuz was there. So these dudes had already had basically been hashing this before this. They called this meeting. They had already. Donald Archie wasn't there. The only two dudes that was there from our part of the neighborhood was me and Mouse. So we were there, so we are there. So they talking. They say, yeah, man, we out in the streets, we fighting these dudes over here. We showing up at all of our meetings. We collected money for this. We doing that. Because by then we had a sergeants of arms and we had a treasury. We had bylaws. This group
Crips with a treasury. Imagine that.
Yeah, but you know who the treasurer was, right?
No.
Michael Christian was the treasurer. And I was the sergeant of arms. And so I said, well, what is this? We found all of this out. We did all of this ranking at a meeting that took place 2 weeks before. So the sergeant of arms, we kept all of the artillery. So that's what the sergeants of arms did. The treasurer, he collected the money. So when we have a meeting, everybody had to give a certain amount of money and stuff, which was good because you could use the money for gas or whatever needs you had. They would give you the money for it. Like you get the money to get something to drink. You say, hey, man, I want to get some cold duck, man. Treasury, I want to get some cold duck. Then the treasurer look at you crazy. Man, this money ain't for cold duck. Come on, man. And, and you give you a couple bucks to go get some cold duck. And we walk down to Thrifties and do that if we didn't pull a raid. But if you pull a raid, then that brings all the cops in the neighborhood. And then that just is, they didn't like that when that would happen. But sometimes it would be so many kids there, you can't reach all of them. But anyway, at this particular meeting that night that broke up the West Side, these dudes, they described their grievance, the grievance they had with Took. And I'm like, so what really threw me for a loop is the way that Buddha was talking. That's what threw me for the loop because he got him a job with him. They both working for Bob. So I'm like, damn. And then they had just came back from San Diego because they were up there together. So it's tripping me out. So I'm listening to it. And then at the end of the meeting, they said, well, Took ain't going to be running the West Side no more. And then they said, well, everybody's taking their sets back. And then I wanted to get a little boisterous, and Mouse kind of like nudging me down. So then I kind of like listened to him. So I didn't argue. I was getting upset in my kid brain. I could feel I was being, I didn't like it. What they were saying because Took wasn't there. I was like, damn, but Took wasn't coming to none of the meetings. Because remember when I said you don't want to be in a gang, all your life, a gang that you got in when you was in elementary school or you got in junior high school. And Took in them's case, they were already in high school when the set started. They were in other gangs prior to that. But this one was the big one. This one was I didn't like when they said that we taking our sets back and that Took ain't the leader no more. I didn't like that.
All right, I got a lot of questions before you finish.
Yeah.
So had Raymond caught his case yet?
Yeah, Raymond was already locked up.
Okay, so this is the end of 72 or
summer
to the new year.
Right.
All right, so Raymond's gone and Tookie spending time in Banning, California, right?
Well, Tookie's spending a lot of time with Bob. Wherever Bob and them's at first Took was in Pomona because he was in Boys Republic.
Right.
So at this time, Took was just getting out of Boys Republic. And he was with the guy who had the purse strings to the Red House, to the Slater House, the guy who started those homes. Right. That guy took a shine to Took and seen his leadership qualities, and he started talking grown man shit to Took. Right. And Took was all for it, Right. So right. Took Bonnie could probably tell a story, better than me on how Took was maturing and everything was going good for him. She just didn't know the part about our meeting because there was no women there. There was just a selected few of gang leaders of neighborhoods that was there.
Was Melvin Hardy there? Big Hoove there?
No, Big Hoove wasn't there. Big Hoof might have been in the joint in 72.
Melvin Hardy?
No, Melvin Hardy was out. Melvin Hardy was there. Melvin Hardy was like the leader. When Tookie ain't around, Melvin Hardy was the leader. We all respected Melvin as the leader. If Took wasn't on the scene, then Melvin Hardy could call shots on all of us.
All right. And so y'all meet up, y'all gathering around, y'all kneeling down. How does the meeting go?
So Monkey Man, he said, so we are going to take our sets back. So I said, what does that mean, basically? And then they said, well, y'all Magnificent Seven. We Melvin Hardy and them was Block. And Monkey Man and them was UG. Buddha was UG. So they were all UG. Believe it or not, at this time, Pookie was in Hood. He was in Hood at this time. So Pookie was in Hood. The only reason Odie wasn't there, I think Odie could have been locked up, or Odie could have been in the military. I'm talking about Big Odie. Big Odie from the block. Spry's brother.
Right.
So Mr. X wasn't there. So the only person who came down from the hundreds was Melvin Hardy, Buddha, and Monkey Man and Pookie. They were all out of the hundreds. And so Cuz, believe it or not, Cuz stayed in the Brim neighborhood. That's where he lived at. Because we took him home a couple times, and I told Mouse, I said, "Damn, this dude stay right down there by all the Brims, because as soon as you cross Normandy, you was in the Brim neighborhood." So he stayed back over there toward Vermont. And so I said, "Yeah, man." So Hillbilly, he was across, everybody that was across Manchester, going I guess that's going north, across Manchester. So yeah, so they basically broke the West Side up that night. So and then what happened is, this is the scandalous thing that happened. So Took got word of it, and so Buddha told him they had a meeting. This and this went down. Pookie, he was talking this way, he was talking that way. That's why that weekend, the following weekend, we had a record hop at Sportsman Park Record Hop, and boss Tom Cross, that's who would sponsor our record hops. And so I remember Took all of us, we went up there because I'm like, Took, what you gonna do? You go, what's gonna happen? And like that. And so Took was mad. So he crossed the street, and Pookie and all of them was across the street. It was like maybe about 40 of them. And they were all on that side. So we were all on our side, and we all out front. So Took and Buddha, they crossed the street. So they told us to wait here. So we all waited on our side, and they went over there. So Took got to talking to Pookie, and they were like in each other's face. Pookie wasn't backing down. And they were like, woody. You couldn't hear what they saying, but you could see their posture and the way they moving. And, I know these dudes. And so Took get off. Bow. And so he put dogs on Pookie, and then everybody's like, oh. So all the dudes, they all cross the street. We all go up into the record hop. Pookie gets himself together. He crosses the street. Now we back on our side. And then, so I was wondering why he got off on Pookie. So I kept asking Mouse. I said, "Hey, Mouse, why did Took get off on Pookie?" And then Mouse said, "I tell you." And then I said, "All right." So we're in the record hop. So everybody's in the record hop. Took and Little James, they walking around the record hop, swole, flexing. Michael Irvine coming there. So all these dudes is in there. Monkey Man's in there. We all in there. And then I'm like, he didn't mention none of them dudes, Mouse said. Mouse said he made it seem like we had the meeting, and Pookie was the main one breaking up the West Side. I said, how can he think Pookie's the main one breaking up the West Side? He ain't like on the same age group, level of thug with those guys that broke it up. We there, we got our sets back, but he blamed it all on Took. I said, who? He's Buddha. And I said, oh man, that dude is scandalous like that. And then Took never knew that Buddha backbited him at that meeting. Yep, never knew. So, and then you see what happened. Huh? What would you say, Kev?
I said that's crazy because that was his right hand man.
Yeah, and so what? But Sweetback knew. Because Sweetback wasn't at the meeting. So I told Sweetback everything. He said, "What happened at meeting, Cutes?" I told him. And so remember I talked about jealousy. Remember when I started this conversation out, I was talking about how we come up with this enviness and this jealousy. So these dudes, Tookie was the first one to get a car out of that group. See, the Magnificent Seven, we already had cars. But those guys, a lot of them guys didn't have cars. Which had a car? Buddha had a car. Tookie had a car. Cuz didn't have a car. Melvin Hardy, they would ride around in a hearse. So I guess they owned the funeral home, or their mother or something, or their father was instrumental or deacon at a church. But I'm just saying, Took had a car, Lincoln. And so, and Took had charisma. He was getting on Super Swole, he was swab. Everybody liked him. He had that personality, and he was a good leader. He wasn't a troublemaker, and he didn't like guns. He was like, he would rather, fight you than to bust on you. He wasn't like that. And so these dudes got jealous because this is what happened. When all of these guys ended up with Bob Simmons, everybody I named ended up with Bob Simmons. But Bob Simmons tried to get all of those dudes a job. He tried to get everyone. He stretched his neck out for all of those guys to get a job. These guys had other things on their mind. They didn't want to work. It was exciting times. They didn't want to spend 40 hours a week at this place, put it in this work with all of these young thugs that Bob Simmons was pulling out of juvenile hall, because Bob Simmons had juice. He was pulling kids out of juvenile hall that had GTAs, had burglaries. These kids were all headed to the camps and stuff. And he was getting kids out of Compton, out of Los Angeles, and even further away. He were pulling them up out of there. He had all races, He had the majority of blacks, but he had whites in there, and there were Mexicans in there, and there were Crips and Bloods in there. This is when it first started. So I'm just letting you know. So Took couldn't come to the meetings, all of them, because he got a job and he's running shit. He's over all of these juvenile delinquents. He got to give them a regiment. He got to be there. You can just walk off from a placement. Have you ever been in a placement and the people just start walking off, getting in trouble? Now that's going to take away from their credibility. It's going to make public safety this, public safety that. But none of that was going on. People would get there, they would stay in there. But you had to put in work for that, and Took was put it in the work. Mouse didn't want to work. He offered Mouse a job too. He said, "Hey, Mouse, why don't you come on over here and work with me?" And the Mouse already had a job. He was driving the beer trucks. Mouse was working for the big dude from the Green Bay Packers. He was working for that big ass, football player. He was working for him and Tom Selleck, and then they were partners in owning the Slits book distribution place right there in Watts.
So what was Blackie at during this time?
Well, let me shut my little bulldog up. Shut up, you little bulldog. Knock it off. All right, that did it. You're a bad little bulldog.
What was Blackie at?
Okay, so Black in 72, I'm going to tell you what happened in 72. So around 72, you had I think Blackie and I think what's his name? Warlock and them. I think Blackie and Warlock and them was getting in trouble. I think because I stopped seeing Warlock a lot back then, and then I would see him, then he would go. Because you got to remember, this is when Michael Christian, Warlock, and all them got locked up. That was like in 72. But they were getting in trouble in 72. By 73, they were already gone. You know, and Big Buck was gone, Raymond was gone. So a lot of the guys, Mad Dog was gone.
Okay, watch this, Q. I don't want to ruin your timeline, but
no, Blackie wasn't in it. Fact is, Blackie wasn't even recruited yet. He wasn't even. Because remember, Blackie came from the Denver Lanes. So I don't even know if Tookie and them had recruited him yet. I don't know if they flipped him yet.
Well, what I was gonna say is, remember, Barefoot Pookie, Michael Concepcion, Lavelle Frierson, and somebody else had caught a case in 72, like in March of 72.
Yeah.
And Pookie was gone for 6 months out of state release.
Yeah.
So,
but this was before all of that, because this
this before the Hollywood Palladium murder.
It was
they were still claiming West Side and East Side, right?
Yeah, it was the West Side broke up. This meeting took place in 72, and it was right around that time. It was right in that time frame.
Well, keep in mind, okay, if Pookie is back, so Pookie comes back around September. Yeah. Raymond Washington caught his case in October, something like that.
Yeah, well, Raymond was definitely gone.
Right. So I'm just saying it's the end of 72. I was just narrowing it down to like October, November.
Yeah. Yeah. Because this is what I know for sure. What you call him? I think Erskine was locked up. I know Sweetback wasn't locked up yet, but all of these dudes had pending cases, and some of them were like out fighting their cases.
Yeah, so it would be the end of 72, early 72. Everybody wasn't catching cases yet.
Yeah, I think it was toward the end, because Buddha died shortly later.
Right, early 73.
Yeah, I think school hadn't even started, because I remember he told me to go up to Crenshaw.
I know, big deal. I was just trying to keep the timeline right. Go ahead with your story.
Yeah. That's right in there. You're right, though. That was around the time period right there. So what I meant by jealousy and everything is that these guys started being envious of Stanley, okay? And who he thought was his real friends wasn't his friends, you know? And that's just who he thought this dude was his friend, you know, but that guy was so jealous of him, man. It wasn't funny, man. You know.
Now this was a West Side meeting, right?
Yeah, it was a West Side meeting, man.
No Compton, no East Side.
No. And the funny thing is, we met Compton in 72 up at me and Blackburn. It was me, Blackburn, Erskine, Miles Barney, who just passed away. We were all at the Capper House. Remember I told you we had met him over there in the Shell gas station parking lot. That was Mac. That was Compton right there. You know. But Raymond was out to go to the Watts Festival of 72.
Yeah, that's in the summer though.
Yeah, he was there. He was because we were together there.
Yeah.
He seen some 72. Yeah.
Reggie Owens had a front row seat to the West Side Hundreds.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so I wanted to talk about that, you know, how and then after that happened.
You never finished when you said he put dogs on Pookie, and then y'all was wondering who he was putting dogs on next.
Yeah, it never was. It never was no next.
Right.
It never was. And then after that, you could always see Took trying to talk somebody, to come back to the West Side. Let's make it West Side. And then Took finally realized there wasn't going to be no West Side. And then he just started working harder. He started getting bigger promotion. Running the house. Then he got his own house. To run. What's under there? Then he ended up, getting in trouble. Then he ended up getting shot. And then he ended up moving back on 69th Street. When he moved back on 69th Street, now he's back in the frying pan.
Baycott and Big Bob, the February was the 1972 was the Palladium murder.
Yes. What month did that happen?
In February.
Yeah.
Or March. February, March. Pookie's incident was right after that.
Yeah, so yeah. Me and Pook talked about when the West Side broke up. We also talked about, everything that transpired after that. And he agreed with me that they put it on him. He agreed with me that that's what had happened. But him and Tookie, they didn't have good blood because Pook started coming in our neighborhood a lot when his uncle moved on my street, and then we would go over Tookie's house, and Took would just be quiet, but we would go over there. But I could tell they wasn't really like ever gonna be friends like me and Took would be friends or Mouse and Took, but there was no I can't trust you kind of shit.
Well, Melvin Hardy gave me his version and Pookie gave me his version, and they both lined up. They both was the same story. Tookie supposedly didn't like Pookie always kicking off fights at the parties.
All of them dudes did it. Everybody would turn a party out. Out of all them guys I named, those guys would be the ones we would turn the party out. We saw those guys turn the parties out first. That's where we got it from, basically. Yeah. They would be the ones leading the charge on fighting in the party. And most of the parties got turned out because it would be another gang at the party.
Yeah.
Or it would be somebody there talking shit, or somebody would pull out a weapon. Or it always started over something, basically.
Yeah.
This is Los Angeles.